I am here with my buddy Melvin. He's not Thor, he's Melvin. And this is Melvin's roadmap to success. Now, Melvin is an interesting case because he had a bad experience with somebody handling him. And so he doesn't like having his paws touched if you're examining him. If you're not, like I am right now, he was fine with that. But when you start having the exam part, that's when he starts getting uncomfortable. So, all right, so we went over a lot of stuff. I'm going to cover the fundamentals, then we'll cover the exercises at the end. So basically, the fundamentals we went over is introducing a marker word. He's been clicker trained, but we're going to use the marker word yes. Yes, just like there. And that's celebrating, which we'll talk in a sec. So by the time you guys see this, you should have walked around the house, yes, treat, yes, treat. Both of you guys do that until yes means he's going to look up. All right, so we also went over hand targeting, and boop was the cue. If you forget how to do that one, message me. I have videos on that specifically. I'm happy to share with you. We also went over how to introduce the cue. Remember, there's the cue, the name, sit. Then there's the action, the dog sitting. Then there's the marker word to tell the dog he did what you wanted. Then there's the reward, the pet, the treat, or the attention. But when we're teaching dogs, we don't do the first step until it's easy to do it. We shouldn't say the cue unless we're 90% certain Melvin's going to do the action. So we lure the dog into doing it over and over and over again until it's easy to lure them. Then we say sit and lure them into a sit, and you do everything else the same. So remember to keep that in mind anytime you're introducing a new cues for him. Yes, now you're smiling for the camera. You wouldn't smile for me. Now you're going to smile for the camera. It's like, yeah, there's millions of people on YouTube. That might give me some treats. All right, we also went over what I call the celebrate game, which is basically a shaping exercise, which we did towards the end of the exercise, end of the session. But basically, for the celebrate game is, we'll do it right here. Yes, good boy. I shouldn't say good boy, I should just say yes. So he laid down. I didn't ask him to lay down, but after he laid down, I said yes, and I scratched him a little bit with my foot. So celebrating is just rewarding him when he does anything that you find desirable that you do not ask for. Remember, you need to mark within 2 seconds and then provide a pet, a treat, or attention as the reinforcement. And after a while, he'll start coming and sitting in front of you, and if you don't pet him, he'll resit and resit because that is what gets attention. Now, we also went over what I call the manners lesson. Yes, the manners lesson is basically if he's demanding attention, if he's growling, if he's pawing at you. We're going to tell him, Melvin, sit. That's a growl, and that's a down. That's not either thing that I asked for. So I'm not going to pet him because I asked for something specific and he didn't give it to me. A lot of people would say, oh, he tried, I'm going to give it to him. That's actually confusing for him. Remember, half of how dogs learn is not doing what you want and then not being rewarded, not hearing the marker word and not being petted. And so he gave me a little growl there, and he growls kind of not, that wasn't an aggressive growl, that was just kind of it's like a Melvin's thing actually. And so for him, when he growls, we'll talk about that in a sec, but if you ask a dog to do something and do something else, don't reward them. That's actually confusing and frustrating for them. The manners lesson is if he's nudging me or barking or growling, I'm going to tell him to sit, or Melvin, down. Yes. So he did what I wanted. He downed. I didn't want the growl, but I'll reward that anyways. So manners is when he is demanding attention in a way that is not as polite as we would like it to be. We're going to tell him to do a cue that we like, sitting or down, or touch boop if you want. And if he does it, then we say yes and reward him. If he doesn't, we just go on to the next thing. That motivates him to want to do it again. And these things work complementary. If we're petting him every time he sits, then we ask him to sit and he doesn't sit, he knows, oh man, if I would have sat, I would have gotten that attention. What was I thinking? All right, we also went over dog consent and cutoff signals. The guardians here have done a pretty good job of recognizing his body language. We also talked about body language. But just remember not to start petting him on top of the head. Ask people if they want to meet him, hey, just hold your hand out, see if he wants to meet you. That's a yes. And then tell him he likes being petted under his chin or on his chest. Otherwise, people are like, doopsie-doo, they pet him on top of his head, and dogs don't like that. They don't like it when you start petting them on top of the head. What else did we talk about, Melvin? We also went over the importance of rules and structure. And so having some rules, sit before I start preparing your food, sit before I put the harness on you, sit before I open the door every time we cross the street. Little asking him to do little things before he gets something for himself. That's a Premack principle. That's a nice way to help him kind of have a healthier respect for the leader-follower dynamic. Now, we also went over a number of, let me see, I'd recommend the guardians go back to feeding him out of Snuffle Mat because he does have a food guarding issue. but he eats his food really fast. So snuffle mat will slow it down. It's also like a short walk. I also think they probably could do with a little bit more exercise. Shorter, more frequent exercise is better than fewer iterations of a longer form of exercise because of how often dogs sleep. So I'd like to see maybe feeding him on a snuffle mat once a day, doing the bucket game or the It's Your Choice, the other games we just talked about, which we'll talk about in a sec, for the other meal. And then maybe take him out for a sniff walk. If he comes over and he's growling at you, take him out for, tell him to touch or sit or do something else where he doesn't have to growl. Then take him out for a 5-minute sniff walk. A 5-minute sniff walk is amazing how much it resets because you go outside and then he gets all the sniffs and he comes back in. A lot of times they're pooped and they just lay down. I know you want to lay down. Lay down. No, there's people outside. I'm a guard dog. Guard duty. Yes, I see you. Yes. Licking the lips can also be an indication of a little anxiety as well. All right, so what are the exercises we went over? We also went over cookie in the corner, scent games. I would invite you guys to Google scent games and look for some scent games celebrating. Look for some scent games that you can practice with him. One of the scent games that we did was teaching him to dig. We had a blanket, we put on the ground, a hand towel really, and we put a handful of treats in a pile in the middle of it, and we held our hands on the blanket. Every time, at first he nudges it with his nose. I said, yes. I reached under, grabbed him one, gave him a treat. But because we wanted him to scratch his nails, the Guardians have actually a little device that's got a little I didn't realize that it had the container in the middle of it. But basically, we just, as soon as he digs that, we say yes, and then give him a treat. And when we can anticipate, we say dig, he scratches, we say yes, reach under, give him a treat. So now we can say scratch. If we have a scratch board, we can say, Melvin, scratch. And then you give him a treat. And so that's a nice way for him to get his paws, his nails down without us having to touch, because that's one of the issues that he has. Now, we went over a couple of things. I recommend the Guardians find a vet that practices what's known as cooperative care. Cooperative care is teaching the dog to look at a bowl. They do the examination, and at any time the dog looks away from the bowl, the examination stops. So the dog gets to call the shots. I don't have to bite the vet. I can tell the vet I don't feel comfortable. But not a lot of vets practice that. So you might look for fear-free handling, fear-free vets, that sort of thing. And there's a bunch of websites that do accreditation, and they'll usually list, and I know in Los Angeles there's a bunch of places that do it. All right, I'd recommend you do happy vet visits. Once you find your new vet, go to the vet office when they're closed on a Sunday. Play the Find It game, throwing treats in the grass, in the grass section that's near it. You're not going inside. We're just going there and practicing. So you say, find it, throw the treat. As soon as he licks it up, you say yes, and then you throw another treat. And just keep on doing that for maybe a minute or two, and then come back home. So he's like, and next time you get there, he's like, oh, I like this place. This is where we're going to play the game on the ground. I get the treats. And then I would eventually play it closer to the door, play it outside the front door, eventually call the place and explain what you're doing. It's called a happy vet visit. And just say, we'd like to come in during your closing time when there aren't any other dogs here. And we just want to practice having him play the Find It game in your lobby, so he just, as a positive association with your place. Good vets will like it when you do this. And then go there and do the same thing. Eventually do the same thing in the exam room. Eventually do the same thing on the exam table. And so he gets used to it, and have him sit on the exam table, have him lay down on the exam table. He's comfortable doing all these things, and there's no exam that actually happens. So it just builds up a lot of positive associations. Now, we also went over, well, I guess I'll go over it now. I would also recommend the Guardians muzzle train him. Now, we'd like to do all the exercises I'm about to talk about first before we worry about using the muzzle. But if he has an emergency at the vet, we'd rather have him muzzle trained so the vets can do what they need to do and the vets stay safe. But I don't ever advise putting a muzzle on, putting a muzzle on and then taking the dog to a situation where they feel uncomfortable, because that's going to make it amplified. So for the muzzle training, I held the muzzle out, and if this is how I'm going to put the muzzle on, this is the dog's head, I'm going to hold it here. So I can basically put it on, but I held it here. We dropped a treat in, he licked it up, and then stuck his head up. But he's putting his head into the muzzle. That's the first stage. And you want to keep doing it until he's doing it consistently. Then you could take maybe a piece of some peanut butter or something like that, rub it on the inside of the muzzle. And he does that, and then maybe we take the sides and we hold them up back against his head. I don't think he's going to have a problem with that. That's different than examining his heads, but it could be. If it does, then we're going to do that partial thing that we talked about off camera. But eventually, when you finally attach it in the back, you want to have a copious amount of treats, and you're just giving him treat, whatever treat it is. We don't want him pawing to get it off. And we want to have him wear it for maybe 30 seconds, where we just give him treat, and then we take it off. before he paws at it. Eventually he waves it for a minute, and eventually we're, instead of treat, 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 we're like treat, treat, but we end up beating him the punch. We don't want him pawing at it. Eventually we want to get to the point where you put it on him, and then you're feeding him a treat through it, putting him on the ground. He's getting used to licking him off the ground, and he's not pawing at it. I like the dog to actually have the muzzle on, completely secure, and fall asleep and wake up without pawing at it. That's when I know they're fully muzzle trained. And you should be able to hold it out, and the dog should run across the room and want to put their nose in there. If that's not the case, you're not there yet. And you don't want to use it until the dog is completely relaxed with the muzzle. Now there's something called tenting, where you kind of gather the skin. This is what a vet is going to do right on his butt there, and then they're going to inject into that. So that's also something you can do. That's in one of the handling exercises I'm gonna link above. That's one of the things we do with puppies. And it's important, if you're watching this and your dog doesn't have these issues, it's still important for your puppy to feel comfortable with that. Do you need to deal with that? Can you take over? We have a little shuffling. Melvin's like, I can take over. There we go. All right. So basically, so tenting is just getting him prepared so that skin gathering is also not something he's going to be worried about. All right, now something else some of the exercise we went over. The video above, I tried to go over our body handling exercise. Because of his intensity of his reaction, wasn't able to go as fast or as much as I liked. But the guardians here understand and recognize that. A lot of us, we practice too fast. We go at our pace. The dog ends up having a negative association or it's too much, and they bite. So really, we're going to watch those cutoff signals when you're doing those, and you're going to reach a little bit, pull back, and then yes, and give them a treat. Reach a little bit more, give them a treat. And I usually, when I'm reaching, I like to do each reach about 3 times. Now, this is just my baseline to start off with. I do 3 times in a row the same reach before I go to a little bit more criteria. And then I do 3 times of that one. So he kind of understands it's not just going to be reach a little bit, then more, now you're touching me. So each one, I know that you're going to go back and forth. And if he gives any cutoff signals, we back off a little bit further, make it a little bit easier, practice there. And we always want to end, no matter it's training, desensitization, any of these exercises, we always want to end on a good repetition. So if you have to make it super duper easy, you just go like this and give him a treat without him growling, that's great. You want to end on a positive, but keep it 1 to 2 minutes maximum. For desensitization, for the reaching thing, I would be less than 60 seconds each time we do that. I'd also set him up for success. Take him out for a little bit of a sniff walk, have him come back in, have him give 10 minutes of rest, then practice this exercise. Now, because he has a food guarding issue, I would probably feed him first, half an hour later before I do these exercises. One of the things we went over is handling while eating. Feeding him out of my hand and then touching him a little bit, but he really struggled with that one. At the very end of the session, we did a shaping exercise where one of the guardians basically sat cross-legged here and had a bowl right in between. Every time he looked at the bowl, she put a piece of his kibble in there. And at first he was breathing heavy, but then he kind of laid down, he settled down, he kind of figured it out earlier and earlier. And then he could do other things. You have a different type of a bowl, or maybe you have 2 bowls you gotta look at. But the idea is we just want him, he looks at the bowl, and then we put 1 piece of kibble in there. So he's initiating an action, yes, some good sniffs, and then we're rewarding him for doing that. That was a really, I kind of was regretting that we didn't film that one because that one went really well, and I think the guardian that he did that with felt very confident doing that exercise. So that's a nice way for her to be close to him with food, and he didn't show any guarding behavior. Now, he does have a tendency to growl, and I think he's confused. Sometimes he growls out of frustration. I think he growls sometimes as warning. Sometimes he growls because I think he's just growled so much he just forgets what he's doing. He growls. Now, if you interpret that as growling, I mean, it's hard because you can't tell the difference. But when you're doing some of these exercises, first time he bares his teeth or growls, I would get up and leave your apartment, close the door, so that, and then wait, and then get a camera and watch and wait for him to kind of settle down and come back in. And then if he's calm, you can practice it again. But you have to do it the very first time. You're like, oh, he didn't really mean it. That's confusing for them. As soon as I bare my teeth, and he's not consciously doing it, it's an involuntary reflex, but after a while he'll recognize that causes my people to leave. That causes the food to stop. And so one of the exercises we were doing was the bucket game. Now, I do the bucket game different than cooperative care. Cooperative care, they just teach him to look at the bowl. But what I do is I hold the bowl here at my shoulder. He looks at it. I say yes. I take a treat out and give a piece of kibble, give it to him. Then I move the bucket on this shoulder. He looks at it. Yes. Take another one out. And so you have 5 passes here with him in a sit. If he stays in a sit for all 5, then I move down to my torso. 5 passes left to right here. That's a good down. And then if he stays in the sit, then my waist, then my knees, eventually the floor. But the lower it goes, the harder it gets for him. There's our buddy finally. Kitty's coming out to say hello. So that's the bucket game, and we do it as an impulse control exercise, but because he has a food guarding issue, that might be helpful for him just to recognize that you're delivering the food and you're close by. The other thing we went over is It's Your Choice, which is a Susan Garrett exercise. She spells it It's Y-E-R, your choice. And what we do is I have a handful of treats. I hold it over here. He looks at it. I say, yes, open my hand, take a treat out, give it to him, close my hand, and wait for him to look at it again. Yes, open my hand, then give him a treat. Now, eventually, you want to move it closer and closer. The way Susan Garrett does it, she holds it here, opens her hand. If he goes for it, she closes her hand like that. That I can see him biting. And that's why I don't like doing it. It's a negative punishment. So you want to do it until you can kind of go here, and he's pretty content. He's sitting and relaxing. Then eventually what you do is he looks at it, you say yes, take a treat out, give it to him, close your hand, and move it 1 inch closer. So it gradually gets closer and closer and closer. But again, any growling, boom, we're out of here. Yes. Are you going to guard that? Yes, there was a little conversation we would do. Oh, you're guarding me, huh? Yeah. The cat's going in Melvin's house. I don't know if Melvin is thinking that's okay, but he's like, as long as you leave David's bag alone, it's all good. Let me see. What else do we want to go over? So Thor is that video for the dog where we did the iterations of reach. But really the main thing is we got to go at slow at his pace and stopping the activity before he gives any cutoff signals or warnings, and then gradually get a little bit more deeper and reach for a little bit further and further, a little bit further. Cat is like, leave me alone. You see my ears way back? Now you're being a corgi. That was some hurting right there. All right, yes. Now I'm gonna guard David a little bit. And see that, yeah, there's a little conversation going on here. Okay, I'm trying to think what else we went over that we want to go over. Hey, kitty, don't bite me, please. Is there anything else you want me to talk about?
No.
Find a couple of those scent games, though. I really think that'll help because it's a nice thing he's got to use for his nose. And there's a guy named Ford. He is like the best guy when it comes to scent training, but he does like bomb detection and stuff like that. So some of his courses are really expensive, but you might find a couple of videos that are free, and there's other people that do it as well. All right, I was going to call you Thor. Melvin, come here, buddy. The crack treats that I was using are Stewart's freeze-dried beef liver. Oh, one other thing, you might get a piece of like soft food, put it on a fork, and then let it, and he's going to chomp, and he's going to hit that metal. He's not going to like that. He's going to back off, and then he'll start kind of using his lips. And then you can say gentle, and then he licks it off. So you guys have already done that lesson a little bit, but this will help him have a little bit better feeling for it. The last little thing I would have you check on, I can't remember the name of the medication. You guys don't have to say it. Some medications lower bite inhibition. Prozac does. So they're less likely to restrain themselves from biting. I would check and see if that is a side effect. Now, he has OCD. So I'm okay with that, but if that is a contributing factor, then that's just something for us to be cognizant of. All right, Melvin, you got anything else for me to go over? No? You should be looking at the camera. This is Melvin, and this is Melvin's roadmap to success. Remember, everything you do trains your dog. Only sometimes you mean it.